A good time is coming. I wish it were here. The very best time in the whole of the year. I'm counting each day on my fingers and thumbs the days that must pass before Santa Claus comes. We're going to have a good time in our treehouse today. We're going to have a story about Santa Claus, and he makes it fun just by the way he talks. This is some of the things he says. We've got to get with it. Cool it. Real groovy. I've had it. I've got to split. And right on. Santa is counting down to Christmas. He only has a few days left, and he's got a lot of work to do. I'd like you to meet some of his helpers. This is Ezra. And Ezra is boss of the elves, and it's his job to see that all the toys are made and ready to go. This is Mrs. Claus, and she's going to be busy with that new sack she has to make for Santa. Here are Dunder and Prancer, two of Santa's reindeer. They're worried about Santa. He's on some kind of a kick. Is this one of Santa's helpers? What is that? And what's that on his head? What's happening in our story today? How come Mrs. Claus has to make a new sack for Santa? How come Dunder and Prancer are worried? Let's read our story, Count Down to Christmas, and let's find out. Are you sitting tall? Our story is fanciful, and it's in rhyme. Listen. 'Twas countdown to Christmas, the 14th of December, way back in the 60s, was the jet age, remember? And the jolly old Santa Toy Corporation, an old-fashioned factory with no automation, was going full blast, full tilt, and full swing, with the toy-making elves all doing their thing. They'd be done before Christmas. They had never failed yet. Just the same, Santa worried. He was in a big sweat.
We've got to get with it.
As he made the rounds of the factory each day,
we don't dare miss a thing in the way of new toys for this new generation of mod girls and boys.
This angered old Ezra, the boss of the elves, who okayed the toys that were stacked on the shelves.
Dad blasted, I keep checking the list. For all I can see, not one item's been missed. We've got all the latest in scale model trains. We've got jets and copters and newfangled planes, dune buggies, dragsters, all kinds of haulers, earth movers, dozers, and tractors and crawlers.
Oh, cool it. That's enough. Tomorrow we'd better start loading the stuff.
And he hauled his old leather sack off the hook, held it up to the light, then after one look, Santa exclaimed,
Oh, what a beat-up old rag. What a sad sack. It's all shot. It's a drag.
That sack has served many a season. We've held on to the thing for a mighty good reason.
Oh, good reason or not. What I do with the sack is for me to decide. It's a worthless old relic. One total loss.
And he opened the window and gave it a toss. The wind caught the sack. It took off like a kite. Then in no time at all, it had sailed out of sight.
Now, Ezra, don't blow your stack. I'll get Mrs. Claus to make a new sack.
Then away Santa went to explain to his wife how he tossed out the sack he had used all his life.
What I need right now is a new one. And since you're so sharp with a needle and thread, could you dream up a sack that's more like fantastic? A real far-out satchel of nylon or plastic.
I don't like the idea, but then if you insist, I can give it a try.
Oh, real groovy. Oh, that'll be great. Now I must bring my old sleigh up to date.
And with cans of spray paint, all colors but red, he rushed out to the sleigh where it stood in the shed. Then in a frenzy, the frantic old fellow cut loose with a blast of synthetic yellow, a blurp of bright purple, a scriggle of green, a splotchin' of zigzag of ultramarine, while his 8 faithful reindeer gathered about to stare in amazement, their eyes buggin' out. He kept firing away to the reindeer's dismay till he'd covered every last inch of the sleigh. Then in a frenzy, that frantic old fellow cut loose with a blast of synthetic yellow, a blurp of bright purple, a scriggle of green, a splotch and a zigzag of ultramarine, while his 8 faithful reindeer gathered about to stare in amazement, their eyes buggin' out. He kept firing away to the reindeer's dismay till he'd covered every last inch of the sleigh. It was one awful mess for all they could see, and yet Santa seemed just as pleased as could be.
That's what you call mod. It's an up-to-date sleigh, at least for a while. Next year I'll convert this old sleigh into a jet with twin engines and a pair of wings yet. I'll blast off like a rocket on a radar beam. Then I won't need to hassle with a reindeer team. Of course, I'll get rid of my old Santa Claus suit and dress like a pilot while I'm going that route. We're into the jet age. The big thing is speed. A super jet sleigh is like just what I need.
The reindeer could hardly believe it at first. Of all the bad news, this was by far the worst. If Santa was really done with the deer, they'd be unemployed by the end of the year.
We're all washed up, that's what. We'll soon be sold on a used reindeer lot.
Now hold on. You give up too quick. It might be that Santa's on what's called a kick. There's no need to worry. It's only a phase. He'll come down to Earth in a couple of days.
And Prancer was right. There was no need to worry, for Santa did come down to Earth in a hurry. What brought Santa down was the synthetic sack. When it was ready and the time came to pack, the elves discovered there was little room in it. They had filled it with toys in less than a minute. And when Santa tried to cram in a few more, the toys tumbled out to end up on the floor. So he finally gave up. He sank down in a chair with a weary, woebegone sign of despair.
That old sack could hold toys by the ton. It was never quite full till the very last one.
I told you, or I must say I tried. It was more than a sack. It's what was inside. There's no way to replace it. That's what's so tragic. That old sack was special, a thing of pure magic. A magic that sails your sleigh through the sky and also helps all your reindeer to fly.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Ezra. That old sack was great. I've just got to find it before it's too late.
He jerked on a jacket, kerplucked on a cap, flung on a wool muffler, kerwhoppity-whap, pulled on some knit mittens and grabbed a flashlight, then barged out the door with a hasty good night. Up there on the snow-swept top of the world, the wind played mean tricks. It whooshed and it swirled, which meant the sack could have sailed anywhere. It might have been tossed 10 miles through the air. So old Santa searched in a roundabout way. He went on a round trip, you might say. First he went south and then circled back west. Then he decided straight east might be best. For hours and hours he circled around, but no sign or a trace of the sack could be found. He climbed heaps of ice, great frosty white stacks, to shine his light in the crannies and cracks. He crawled into a cave, then quickly backed out when he discovered bones scattered about. It just happened to be a polar bear's lair. How lucky it was the bear wasn't there. Or it would have finished old Mr. Claus with one quick swipe of his great hairy paws.
After this, I must be more careful.
As he left the cave to go trudging ahead, by this time his toes were starting to freeze. He felt the cold creeping up to his knees. The wind had picked up, and now it was snowing. It was hard to see just where he was going. And Santa was barely able to stop, one step away from a 40-foot drop. He took a look down at the foot of the bluff, at the icy cold sea, and that was enough.
No, I've had it. I've done all I could. There's no doubt about it that the sack's gone for good.
After making dead sure which direction was right, Santa headed for home through the freezing cold night. Now he was weary, bedraggled and beat. As he trudged along, he was dragging his feet. He tripped in a ditch. He staggered and stumbled, then lost his footing, and over he tumbled. And flat on his whiskers, old Santa flopped, and into a snowdrift his flashlight kerplopped. What happened next was more like a weird dream. Just a few yards away, in the light's golden beam, he spotted a walrus with a cap on his noggin, a faded brown baggy, beat-up old toboggan.
Can't blame you for staring. This cap is 10 sizes too big for my head.
So I'll trade you. Try this cap of mine. It has a fur lining and should fit you just fine.
Sounds like a good deal. That red cap of yours is dandy indeed.
When he tried on the cap, he found it too small, and he said with a snort,
It won't do at all.
But by this time, old Santa was gone. What I mean, he had snatched up the sack and deserted the scene. It was such a great lift to recover the sack that his feet fairly flew as he galloped on back. The instant he leaped through the toy factory door and plucked down his magical sack on the floor, old Ezra's army of hard-working elves got busy hauling the toys off the shelves, cramming them down in the sack by the ton, taking great care not to break even one. After the packing was well underway, Santa decided to repaint the sleigh. And even though he was in a great rush, he painted the sleigh, this time with a brush, with no fancy tricks, to the reindeer's delight, just a plain Christmas red, lovely and bright.
Hey, that's 1,000,000,000 times better.
Santa confessed as he scurried off to his house to get dressed. It was getting quite late. It was Christmas Eve, with just barely time to get ready to leave. And in half a jiffy, the lively old coot had stuffed himself in his Santa Claus suit.
They can't call me square, not while these big bushy beards are still in.
No one is more up to date, dear. You set the style, at least this time of year. You're far more than someone who delivers the toys. You're the spirit of Christmas to most girls and boys.
Then Santa lost his cool, if you please. He gave Mrs. Claus a big hug and a squeeze.
And now then, I've got to split. Go.
And he bounced out the door with a merry ho-ho. The deer greeted Santa with bright smiles on their faces. They were walking on air as they pranced in their traces. He was the same old Santa. They liked him that way. With his old-fashioned sack and his old-fashioned sleigh, it was just like Christmas, almost, but not quite. But it would be after they'd made their long flight. And at the crack of the whip and a jolly right on, they took off like a shot. They were really far gone. As they faded from sight, Santa called loud and clear,
Oh, a cool Christmas to all and a groovy New Year.
Merry Christmas!